So yeah, Matt Stevens. I sit within our EMEA Chrome go-to-market business. My remit is to sell the dream that is Chrome Enterprise as a viable alternative to Windows or Mac, Linux, thin client devices within organizations from an endpoint perspective. Today I'll focus on the security element of what we've brought to market, and very much whenever we have a conversation with customers around security, it's very much questions from a Microsoft standpoint. Which is fair enough, because that's what people have done for 30 years. So we take a different way of looking at things, which makes some people nervous, but once we actually talk through how we've architectured things differently and complement that with policies, etc., then it very quickly kind of becomes evident that it's a robust platform. I think the threat landscape, for want of a buzz phrase, is changing very much so, and we can secure the endpoint to the nth degree, but if your users are the target, they are very quickly becoming the weakest link, so to speak. And they're all targets for the three kind of elements that you can see on stage here. Phishing is by far and away the fastest growing form of attack into organizations. And they're becoming incredibly sophisticated, and phishing can be a kind of entry point into ransomware or malware. It's ultimately tricking the users into thinking that whoever it is sending it and targeting them is who they believe it is, and then kind of launching the attack from there. And it's that is becoming the compromise point into organizations. The investment that is going into kind of protecting against that is growing exponentially. I think it's 124 billion this year, which is nearly 9% growth on last year. And yet at the same time, the number of breaches is growing by 3 times that, at nearly 30%. And I think it's becoming ever evident that you can throw money at this kind of in the old-fashioned way of let's put antivirus software, encryption software, firewalls, all this sort of thing. It doesn't necessarily equate that if you put another 10, 20, 30% of kind of funding into threat protection, that it's going to equate in a 30% reduction in kind of threats negated. And it's this approach that is broken in our view, okay? And it's trying to protect something in a legacy way of working and a legacy way of managing endpoints. And I generally try to be politically correct in my presentations. The largest account of vulnerability access points were actually through Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Okay, that trusted suite of productivity tools from Microsoft is actually your biggest entry point for malicious users. And so that kind of security by design and the trusted endpoints that you're kind of building and protecting against and provide antivirus software against is negated by people accessing innocuous Excel spreadsheets, okay, that come through from an apparently trusted user. And if you also look at things like Macs have kind of been the bedrock of a trusted, secure platform, and yet threats against Mac as an OS has gone up 80% in the last 12 months alone, okay? So it is a scary old world out there, and because of the nature of how these applications and OSs have been architectured, it leaves them vulnerable to attack from multiple forms. We take a very different view to, like I say, to actually building the OS, the browser, and kind of protecting against some of what we see as these harmful points of entry. And I will run you through this. I am massively biased, and I will, if I lock the door, I'll lock you in and talk to you about it for about 4 hours, given the opportunity. I've only got about 20 minutes left, so I'll keep it sweet. But what do we mean by secure by design? Fundamentally, Google as an organization and also Chrome browser, Chrome OS, we are a digital native, and that means that we're not trying to migrate a legacy tool service or operating system into a cloud-ready product. We're actually building something that is for the cloud from the cloud, okay? And that inherently means that we strip out a number of the vulnerabilities from old ways of working, old ways of managing, and old ways of delivering. And it means that we can build a platform from the hardware through the OS and through the management capabilities in a different approach, okay? I'd love to stand up here and say we're bulletproof, bullet-proof even. We're not, but we're very, very proof against something close to bullets, all right? Everything that we do, regardless of form factor, so for those of you who don't know Chrome devices, I didn't do my raise of hands. Who knows Chrome? Everybody know Chrome? Who knows Chrome Enterprise? One person. 2 people, and he works in my team. So thank you, Anthony. 2 people, one of whom is a Googler, know Chrome Enterprise. We have a massive awareness problem for an organisation built on advertising. Our advertising is terrible, but that's not the official Google view. The awareness piece for Chrome Enterprise, be it a managed browser or a managed OS, is very low, but fundamentally it is a more secure, easier to manage, and cheaper to manage means of delivering content securely and easily, all right? For those of you who don't know Chrome devices, Chromebooks is the obvious one that if you've got kids, they will have one of these potentially. You have Chromebooks, the traditional clamshell, you have convertibles, detachables, tablets, Chromeboxes, which looks like a thin client desktop type device, and then we have Chromebase, which is an all-in-one iMac type thing with a processor in the stand, touchscreen or none. Regardless of form factor, all of those devices have the application of security standards that I'll run through in a second, okay? And so you've got that consistent management regardless of whether it's a nurse working with a tablet in the field or if it's someone sat in front of a console on a factory floor, okay? So it's real nice consistency. From a hardware perspective, first and foremost, every device has a hardware root of trust, so one of our tamper-resistant read-only security modules. We've taken the TPM chip and evolved it. We thought there were vulnerabilities or lack of application within the TPM chip, and we've built on that with our security modules. So regardless of form factor, they all have this TPM chip, and every device has device-wide encryption complemented with user-based encryption, okay? And there is no disable BitLocker to update BIOS. It's on from an encryption standpoint, okay? There's no switching off for updates or anything like that. It's on out the box, and that's how it shall remain. So there's real strong protection at a chipset level, okay? So you know that anything running on the device can only do so against certificates or keys stored in that security module. We then come up to the kind of pre-OS stage and what we call verified boot. So every device has 2 versions of the operating system on them, okay? So you will live and work in the primary, and then sat in the background is the secondary OS. Now, one benefit of that, even before I come on to the content on the slide, is that when you're working on the device, the secondary OS will pull down the latest update, okay? So in the good old days, when you come to update your device, you might need to leave it on for an hour and a half or so while it does the updates for you, which is an immediate way of compromising your security because people don't do it. With Chrome, very simply, when you come to update your OS, you flip from primary to secondary, okay? You're on and off and back on again in less than 30 seconds, okay? So very different approach to that, which you can control. What it also means is that from this verified boot process, we can safely say there's no such thing as persistent malware threats on Chrome, and that is evidenced in the verified boot process. What this does is, on the left-hand side, L for left, when a device boots up, you'll see it run through this check box exercise, validating that the integrity of each of these stages is as it should be. And by as it should be, I mean signed by Google and the OEM out of the factory state, okay? And I'll come on to as to why you wouldn't see the right-hand image. If you have a case where the device sees there's a malware, or there's a change in the state as it was signed, what you'll see is that it will drop from that primary image to the secondary image as part of that boot up, verified boot process, okay? It will then boot up. Were both versions of the OS to be compromised, it will then point the device to a trusted Google server to pull down a clean signed image of the OS. Now what that means is that your corporate data remains secure even if someone were able to compromise both versions of the operating system on your device, okay? They can't access your data because they can't get into the OS, they can't boot up, and therefore your data remains secure, all right? We protect against that in a couple of ways, or in about 250 ways via the management console, but There's a couple of things that we always recommend as best practice disabling. Disable developer mode. Developer mode is generally where you do your funky stuff, you try and break things. You disable that for your users in a corporate managed environment. And then we also have a policy which is force re-enrollment. Now basically what that means is if a device is lost or stolen, and generally where you're going to get compromise of data, even if someone takes the device apart, new hard drive, new OS, etc., puts it back together, when that device turns on and connects to the internet, which it needs to do to start, it will see the verified boot process negated, but also it will pop up with a box saying, this device is managed by company X, please return to sender type thing again. All right? So you've got protection from a verified boot process complemented by policies, meaning that your corporate data, tools and services can't be accessed on the device. Okay. A big thing with Chrome as well is that it's built for the cloud, right? So we're trying to move away from that world that is let's install loads of stuff on the device, slow it down, take compute power, etc. Let's point people towards tool services, repositories that are cloud-based for storage and the like. This is all about reducing that data footprint so that if you do have a device lost or stolen, you know that it doesn't have that much corporate data, personal data, whatever it might be that you're collecting on it, okay? Even if a device is lost, you've got that user-based encryption, and even if you're working within an organization, you can have it so that multiple users, corporate and or personal, can log into the same device, and that user-based encryption will separate the data and encrypt it on logout, okay? So if a device were lost, you've got that protection from an encryption standpoint. We always recommend, if you're using Office 365 or G Suite or Citrix or whatever it might be, you save the data in that service, okay? So this just becomes a pane of glass that is an entry point into your delivery mechanism of services. We also have the bottom point there, which is, it's extreme, but some customers that have a low risk tolerance, like ephemeral mode, essentially means that when you log out or close the device, it wipes everything that's happened in that session, okay? So it essentially nukes the device back to factory, as in your IT deployed state, okay? So real nice protection around data. We see customers in retail environment, banking environment using ephemeral mode for form collection, credit card application type thing with customers in a retail estate, knowing that they can click save, it points to wherever they've stored the data from a banking perspective, but there's nothing kept on the device, okay? We work in a different approach to traditional vendors in terms of patching and update, in so much as we remove the need for you to manually engage with audit, update, patch OSs and AV and other tools and services on the system, okay? We work on a 6-week update cycle. So every 6 weeks you'll get a major release. It's generally about 35 to 50 megabytes. So if you compare that with a 1.5 gig update for other platforms, you can see that the impact on a user is negligible. There are security updates that come in between that, because we recognize that the security piece is ever evolving. And were there a P0, P1, P0 type threat, we can push out globally to all devices within 48 hours, 24 hours, where it is that level of urgency. But what this update cycle means is that we view it as a test forward rather than roll back approach to versions of the OS on a device. And what that means is we have stable beta and developer channels with a 6-week gap between each, okay? So 95% of your users within your organization would be running on stable. We generally recommend having 5% of your organization, advocates, early adopters, things like that, running on beta, which has the release 6 weeks ahead of stable, and then have some devices in a lab or people who are patient within IT running in developer mode so that they can have a play with it. What that means from a test forward perspective is you've got 12 or 6 weeks visibility ahead of stable to see if there are any conflicts with line of business services, in-house developed apps, things like that. If you see, let's take Citrix for an example, if you say we're on 78 in stable now, if in 79 you saw there was a clash with Citrix, you could pin all of your users to version 78 where they are currently, and not release that update cycle until you see the patch, the clash has been fixed. Okay, so it removes the need for you then to manually go and engage with devices and roll back via USB or however else you might manage endpoints. Okay, so again, it's all about stripping out kind of resource requirements to manage that fleet of devices. Sorry. We've also baked in other elements of protection into services on the device as well. So if you've probably all seen this if you're using Chrome browser, the old red screen of death that is safe browsing, do not pass type thing. This is essentially, at a platform layer, we as Google now have 8 products that have got over 1 billion users. Anthony and I were talking earlier, we've got over 3 billion on Chrome browser, over 3 billion on Android, 2 billion on YouTube, etc., etc. As well as me showing off that, what that also is that's 8 platforms of over 1 billion users that we have real-time malicious activity being consumed by our analytics machines, which allow us in turn to feed that into the platforms, the tools, the services, things like safe browsing. We recognize that potential URLs or destination points that people are trying to access are vulnerable, and we can then pop up the safe browsing message without you needing to invest in other software. Okay, so it's just it's a little thing, but it does stop some users browsing to potentially malicious sites. You would back that up with server-side proxy management as well, so you know that you've got kind of double protection around places that people might go. From a trusted application perspective, so we can deliver services in one of four means, I guess. So we have the Playstore. So about a year ago, I think we came out of beta with the Playstore on Chrome. What that means is we've opened up the entire Playstore so that developers can develop once, deliver twice onto Android and Chrome. From a management perspective, you have control of what people can see. You can force install, pin to the taskbar, for example, or let them browse the Playstore. This means that they might not be able to download Angry Birds or Candy Crush within or on their work profile or device, but they would have Sage, SAP, Salesforce, etc. pushed out to them. Okay, so you've got compliance and control, but also flexibility depending on how closed or open you want to be from an app deployment via the Play Store perspective. Web apps via the Chrome browser, more and more tools and services are going to a SaaS type model. So 365 was really the first one that kind of gained traction within customers at scale, but more and more app developers are building for the browser, and Chrome is the most kind of future-proof of the browsers, as we've seen with kind of Microsoft bringing their next-gen browser to Chromium, which is the open source which we built Chrome from. The Chrome Web Store is where you source extensions that allow you to build on functionality within the Chrome browser as well. Again, similar to the Play Store, you have control about which extensions users can or can't download. All right, so you've got control within there. And then additionally, as of about 3 months ago, I think, we've enabled Linux containers onto Chrome devices as well. All right. So this again just breeds flexibility. The number of organizations I speak to where they've got developers running around with a Windows device and a Mac device, if you can consolidate their general day-to-day plus a dev device into one, it saves on kind of device costs, but also licensing management, etc. All right, so that ability to enable a Linux container is really nice. And within that, you can do your kind of black screen coding, but also download Linux applications. I've got Firefox just for fun on my device. I never use it, but it's there to show. But it's that flexibility and that ability to deliver that range of tools and services in a controlled manner. We bolster that, I guess, with sandboxing. So for those of you who don't know, the sandboxing principle essentially means that application or user A cannot view, edit, save, or distribute data from any other application or user. Okay. Now we apply that at a user level across Chrome, so multiple users can exist on the same device without fear of bleeding of data between each of them. That then comes down to an application layer as well. So Chrome browser can't see a Playstore apps data, etc. And then that also applies further down at a tab level within Chrome browser, for example. So if you've got a user does bypass proxy and safe browsing and clicks on a malicious link in a particular tab, that can only jeopardize a particular tab in that browser, and you close that tab, carry on using the browser in the same instance, and everything is fine. Site isolation takes it a step further, which very simply runs each tab as its own separate process. So it's that further level of granular control where you've got an even lower risk appetite. The Chrome web stores, I've touched on this already, but you've got the ability to define and enable permissions based on different groups of users and different extensions, all right, as you go. And then you've got control about who can or can't do X, Y, and Z, all right? So it's just a real granular approach to what you're installing. And then moving beyond the application extension delivery, you've got about 250 policies for the OS, which is available via our management console, okay? So that is, we break it down into device level and user-based policies. So at a device level, you might disable a camera for a particular group of devices in a sensitive area where you don't want visible ability of that location. At a user level, you might enable camera and microphone for Hangouts if you use our tools, or Skype for Business, or Jabber, or whatever else it might be. You can enable or disable certain access points from a Wi-Fi perspective, disable Bluetooth, whatever it might be that you want to control at a device level policy. The last point on there, I was just chatting with someone a second ago. Password alert policy, this is really useful from a browser perspective. So if I log into a consumer website with my corporate password, the password alert policy will notify me, and then I have to change my corporate password. We can't see your password, it hashes it, and there's protections around that. But from a corporate governance perspective, it's just another level of protection that we build in, okay? Because passwords are easily compromised. The Playstore, I've kind of stolen my own thunder to an extent, but the ability to, so you can enable the Playstore, you can then either force install and pin to the taskbar, and or you can just enable the Playstore and have them browse the set of applications relevant to their organizational unit, okay? So that each user would have a curated view. So sales would see different to finance, different to logistics, and so on and so forth, okay? So it all becomes relevant to their particular line of business. Going back to the protections that we put in at a platform layer, at a Google layer, Google Play Protect runs stupid numbers. So they do something like 2 billion platform level scans a day, 500,000 app scans per day. They do dynamic scans, static scans, all sorts of scans that I can't think of other words to describe. But it's all leveraging that engine that sits behind Google as an organization, okay? And it's what we've kind of externalized from search 20 years ago as our bedrock. And then coming into kind of how we keep you and your users safe. So phishing, like I say, is probably the most prominent attack vector from an end user perspective now. And at Google, we haven't had a phishing attack for, I think it's 20 months, something like that, since we introduced 2FA security keys as presence alongside our G Suite and Gmail protection. We also use Beyond Corp, which removes the need for VPN, and it does analysis and access to service based on user, presence, device, and some other kind of controls around network that you're on and things like that. But phishing is very easily, I say very easily, everything is relative in that sort of scale. But phishing is something that you can protect against with a sensible approach, all right? And the ability for that multi-factor authentication alongside username, password, and access to certain sites becomes quite powerful. Ransomware, so WannaCry 2 years ago, I think it was, is probably the biggest example that we've seen, certainly in the UK, of a ransomware attack. And while selfishly it was a great sales opportunity, it's obviously not good to see the NHS as the primary victim of this attack, being so vulnerable to this nature of attack, and that is only going to escalate and become more prevalent. I've seen a highlight today on my phone saying the Labour Party's had a high-level attack, cyber threat today. So it's going to become the new normal, okay? And ransomware will become more prevalent as people look to target legacy OSs and elements of platforms that are more inherently accessible. WannaCry couldn't have happened on Chrome because of the nature of that site isolation sandboxing principles that we implement, okay? And then if something were to compromise a managed device, and I'll bore anyone who wants to talk to me afterwards, verified boot, you would push out that reboot command centrally, verified boot pulls down the signed image, okay? So you've got protection centrally at a boot level. Malicious applications, we always recommend whitelisting applications that you trust, okay? You'll very quickly know that you trust Microsoft, SAP, IBM, etc. From an app perspective. Only push those applications out in your managed Playstore, okay? It's kind of common sense, but it does give you that level of credibility. Antivirus you do not need on Chrome devices, okay? This is something that I get headaches from, I would say, from customers. A lot of customers say we have to have AV to have a corporate device. You don't need it on Chrome, and that's because of that read-only, that base level verified boot process, sandboxing, etc., plus that regular update cycle. Okay, every 2 to 3 weeks you get a security update, meaning that the threats that are known in market are negated by the updates that we implement at a platform level. I've got about a minute left, so I'm speaking quickly. They are so effective, first and foremost, and the main reason for this is so many customers that I speak to, they will spend an hour, 8 hours on an image build to deploy a device secure to its end user. That costs, all right? As soon as it's out the IT function and with an end user, it's gone, right? Because they don't update it because they know it takes an hour or two to update. So that update process regularly and in a manner that you know that your end users will use breeds good practice and ensures your security posture stays as is. And with 30 seconds left, I shall rattle through some statements from customers, all very happy. They're great, and I think and they're great. I forgot the last slide. My favourite slide, one of my favourite statements from a customer is the IT director at Netflix. She said it takes longer to get the device out the box than it does to set them up. All right, and that ability to deploy at scale on the fly and have anyone use them and know that they're secure is incredibly important to customers, okay? The device is up to date, okay? We have a policy where it will pop up saying you have 7 days to update, you have 2 minutes to update, whatever it might be, then it does it for you. But you don't mind because it takes 30 seconds. Even if you're on a conference call, you could just say, oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button, and you're back in less than a minute, okay? So really powerful security protections that we implement. I'm around for a little bit. If you can read the small print up here, there is a link that you can browse to. And I think that is about it from me on time.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much, everybody.